All right. Be starting in just a few minutes here. I'm going to wait for some people to get in. Just make sure. Ooh. Make sure at the right chapter here. I think I stopped on. Okay, no, we're on 5.7. My bad. Hello, my friend. We're gonna wait for a couple more people to arrive. Should be. Give it till 15 minutes. There should be some people coming. Hopefully. The Irish. Oh, it's a good movie. It's a really good movie. I liked it a lot. Yeah, it was long, but I really liked it. What did you think? It was long. It was like 3.5 hours. It was really good. Yeah. Al Pacino is the man. No, I never did find Jimmy Hoffa's body. It's still a mystery. But he was most likely killed by the mafia and probably dumped in the nearest river to decompose. It's what I assume, at least. Or the U.S. government may have got him. Who knows? Who knows? Is one of the great mysteries. Yeah, most likely. I would assume so. Where is everybody else? My one loyal viewer. I'm gonna start in 15 minutes. Or not 15. Once this thing hits 15 minutes, they're trying to find Jimmy Hoffa. Yeah, I'm sure they are. They're not gonna have much luck. Um. Yeah, I need to rewatch The Irishman, but because I don't think my full attention was on it. Like I think I think I didn't doze off. I like dazed out, spaced out at a few parts. Um, but I enjoyed it a lot. I thought it was really good. I need to rewatch it though. The only 3.5 hour movie that can really keep my attention is Lord of the Rings. So, yeah. Ow. Um, let's just see something real quick. Hold on. Just want to see how long Arc 6 is. Oh, okay, Arc 6 is shorter. I feel like we can probably do all of Arc 6 tomorrow. And then split up Arc 7 between, next week and the week, and then next week, the week, like, the next week, the next 2 days of that week. We are definitely doing all of Arc 8 in one night, because it's really good. It's my favorite Worm arc of the early saga. We might do just Arc 8 and 9 like back to back, because as you can see, it's short. Actually, we might do like Arc 9 and 10 in the same night. We'll see. But we after Arc 7, which is huge, as you can see, we get some short arcs. How many arcs there in total? 32. There are 30. Yeah. There are 32 arcs. No, oh, actually, I lied. 31, not counting the sequel teaser, because there is a sequel to Worm. Yeah, it's big. There is a sequel. Yeah, it is a lot of arcs. 31, technically, if you count the epilogue. 30 if you only count like the main arcs, but there are 31 if you count the epilogue. And I will be reading the sequel, but I feel like I'll put that behind like an incentive. I'll read Ward, which is the sequel to Worm. If I hit, I'm gonna say 50 followers. 50 followers will be the sequel incentive for Ward. If I can somehow hit that by the time I'm done reading Worm, then I'll go right into Ward, because that's also finished. It's not as long as Worm, from what I've heard. I actually was looking at other free web novels we can read. There were a couple of really cool ones that I wrote down. Yeah, I wrote a couple names down of ones that sounded kind of cool that are also free. One of them was called A Practical Guide to Evil, which sounded really cool. It'll also be fun for both of us, going into a web serial completely blind. I know nothing about A Practical Guide to Evil. It's the highest rated. There's like an IMDb for like web fiction that I found, and A Practical Guide to Evil has like basically a perfect score, which is insane. It's also still being updated, which might be a problem, but we'll figure that out when we figure that out. We still have a lot of Worm left to go. Like, we're not even halfway in yet. Yeah. Where is everyone tonight? Damn. It might just be you and me. Yeah. I was hoping to go on a mini rant about how the Artemis Fowl movie sucks, and how it's kind of like now like the poster child for Disney making bad decisions, like pumping 125 million into that. And it saddens me because now I'm sure the books are going to suffer because of it. So, if I ever blow up as an author, I'm not selling my rights to Disney. I'll sell them to I think not legendary. Who did Blade Runner 2049? I'll sell to them. Who did Blade Runner? Who distributed? Who produced it? Or distributed it? Oh, Alcon. Alcon did it. No, I'm not selling it to. I'll sell it to Alcon, if anybody. Be like, yeah, get Denis Villeneuve to adapt this. He seems to know what he's doing as far as science fiction is concerned. I'll give it 5 more minutes. We'll definitely finish the arc tonight, no matter how late I start. Cause it's rematch time. It's the WWE rematch you've all been waiting for. There's gonna be air horns going off tonight. There'll be a lot of screaming. It's gonna be awesome. On another note, I was reading a Forbes article about The Last of Us 2 and how the reviewers were restricted for the last like 12 or so hours of the game. And Forbes was like, yeah, this is the part that people have problems with, and that's not really good. That Sony and Naughty Dog are basically like kind of manipulating scores based on that. Um, I've also read a lot of reviewers that are just like, yeah, the game is way too long and the gameplay is really not good, but I give it a 9 out of 10. Or like a 10 out of 10 perfect score. I don't think they're paid, it's just they're extorted. And also he was like, the writer was like, this game is like misery porn. Like there's no levity whatsoever in the game. It's just like 20 to 30 hours of just straight sadness. And while I love me a good suffering story, love to make my characters suffer, for the sake of the good story, you got to break up the suffering so that when it hits harder. So it's not just like just so drained by the end you just don't even care. Um, yeah, I don't know what to say about Last of Us 2. It's a bit of a mess. It's a slight mess. But yeah, I'm not a big fan of the player reviews. Are gonna be fucking. I know. I'm really excited. I'm very excited for the player reviews. That's what I'm really waiting for, because they're not gonna be good. I can tell you that right now. Um, I think that reviewers should speak about the whole game, even if it is like spoilerific. I really don't like that. That reviewers are basically like, don't talk about pivotal moments in the game. Like you can do it. You can basically say I didn't like it or I liked it without spoiling it, I think. But I think they know the player reactions are not going to be very happy. I think they know that already. All right, we'll get started in like 3 minutes here because it seems like it's just you and me tonight, which is fine. All good. Yeah, I'm really amazed at the clusterfuck that Last of Us 2 is probably going to cause among video game players. I don't want to say the term gamer because I hate that fucking term with a burning passion, even though I use it ironically. Like gamers.
Gamers rise up. We live in a society.
Alright. Let's start. Shit. Ah. Okay. Let's begin. Take a sip of water. Hive 5.7. Lungs there, I echoed, as much to let Sundancer and Labyrinth know as to help myself process the idea.
Oh, yeah, brother. Welcome to the Smackdown. Oh, yeah.
He's with Kaiser. I can't get to them. Kaiser blocked the door with giant knives. Ignore Lung? I stressed. If Kaiser wanted to go alone, he could reap the consequences. Priorities are Neuter and Oni Lee. Can you get upstairs to rescue Neuter? I can't ride Brutus in there. I'll have to dismount. Then draw him outside. Watch your back. I hung up, shoved the phone into the compartment behind my back, and drew my baton and knife. What are you doing? Sundancer asked. Oni Lee's a freaking assassin. I can't leave bitch on her own. I didn't wait another second. I bolted for the warehouse, drawing more bugs from the surrounding to help me back up. Bish, still riding Brutus, came rushing out the loading bay door, Judas only a step behind. They skidded to a stop, facing the building. Through the hole the explosion had made in the wall, I saw Angelica climbing down the stairs. As Angelica reached the top of the stairs, Judas lunged up and through the window at the opposite end of the second floor hallway, trapping Oni Lee between them. Oni Lee barely seemed to care. I could see him in his black bodysuit with belts and bandoliers of knives on it, his mask like a demonic face, and leering, fanged ear-to-ear grin. He glanced at one dog, then the other, then looked out the window. I knew his power was a hybrid between duplicating himself and teleportation. He could teleport, but when he did, he left a body behind that could act autonomously for a few seconds. It's such a cool power. So when I saw him glance out the window, I followed his line of sight, and saw he had already appeared just behind Bitch, half crouching on Brutus's back, one hand on the hook of a bone to help keep him balanced. There was a flash of steel in his hand as he reached another around her throat with a blade. Bitch! I screamed. It didn't matter. The same time I opened my mouth, a red dot and a mist of red appeared out of the back of his head. A split second later, another dot and spray of red appeared on his back around where his heart was. He fell on top of Bitch's shoulder, limp, then collapsed into the ground. A few seconds later, he exploded into an opaque cloud of white ash, 10 feet across. I glanced over my shoulder, saw the dark silhouette of Coil's men lying down on the edge of the rooftop. One had a pair of binoculars, the other was set up behind a long rifle with a prominent scope. A sniper team. Anyone else would be dead by now, but the fact that the body had exploded into dust meant it was just a clone, a leftover remaining behind after Oni Lee had teleported away. Probably wasn't remaining in one place for more than a second. My bet was he was appearing, immediately looking for a new target or a vantage point, then making a quick exit, leaving the clone to do the deed. I reached Bitch and cast a nervous glance over my shoulder for Oni Lee. You okay? Felt that fucking still in my throat. She rubbed her throat as if she was checking it was okay. Where'd he go? I saw Oni Lee for only a fraction of a second as he fell from the roof of a warehouse before he exploded into another cloud of dust. Another point for the sniper team. Why had he been up there? Who or what had he been trying to see? The snipers. I breathed aloud. I breathed, whirling around. Where the sniper team had been, there were 4 figures now. I saw the rifle fall from the edge of the roof as 2 soldiers struggled with a pair of Oni Lees. Then puff, the clones were gone, and there was enough white dust around them that they wouldn't be drawing a bead on him ever again, even if they hadn't lost their rifle. But where had he gone from there? I looked around, feeling the panic begin to set in. Brutus made a roaring sound somewhere between a howl a howl and a growl, not quite recognizable as either. He reared like a panicked horse, and I saw Oni Lee drop from the side of his head, land in a crouch, and lunge for me, a knife in each hand. I swatted at his hands with my baton, sending one knife flying through the air and breaking his stride. It didn't matter. Less than a second later, he was dust. He teleported. Hands seized me from behind in a rough Nelson hold, pulling my arms out of the way of each other as another Oni Lee materialized out of the dust in front of me, ready to capitalize on my ability to defend myself. Knowing he wasn't about to let go of me, I brought both my legs up in a kick at Oni Lee's stomach. They connected and he doubled over. Brutus lunged forward, biting at him before he could recover. Both the Oni Lee that was holding me and the one that clasped in Brutus's jaws turned to carbon ash, adding to the volume of opaque, gritty white cloud that surrounded us. As Bitch managed to get Brutus under control, I saw his face. One of his eyes was in ruins, and volumes of blood and other liquids were flowing from it. Ugh. "Fuck this," I growled, drawing the bugs from my costume and retrieving the ones I'd had in the building. I spread them around, reaching for him and hoping for some sort of early warning. No sooner the thought crossed my mind than a silhouette of a figure appeared 20 feet to my right. He whipped his arm in my direction, and I didn't have any time to do much more than turn in his direction before something collided with my head. I stumbled and fell over backwards. In the instant I toppled over, I had the presence of mind to tuck my chin against my chest so I wouldn't add to my concussion. The armor covering my shoulders took the worst of the impact. Oh, hello. Hello, Danger. Very big welcome to you. We just started chapter arc 5.7, so you didn't miss much. We're in the middle of a fight, so yeah. As I lay there, trying to parse what had just happened, I realized a small knife was embedded in the armored section of my mask, cracking the lens. A throwing knife. I pulled it free and pulled myself to my feet. I had enough bugs around me now that I could be sure it wasn't attacking us. That just raised the question of where he was. "Bitch, you okay?" I asked. "Fucker stabbed me in the arm." That's the worst thing. If that's the worst injury we get away with today, we can count ourselves lucky. I headed out of the cloud that surrounded us, hoping to get a better sense of the battlefield. I got out just in time to see Oni Lee tackling one of Coil's snipers off the edge of a roof. Oni Lee disappeared in a cloud of white before he hit the ground. I was pretty sure the sniper hadn't. Sundancer was crumpled over, Labyrinth holding her shoulders. This was not going well. Oni Lee appeared 30 feet from me, standing just to my left and behind me. My bugs gave me a sense of his position before anything else, and I threw myself to one side. I thought maybe I saw the shape of his throwing knives pass through the air while I'd been standing, but I wasn't seeing very well with a cracked lens on my mask. At my command, the bugs had alerted me to his position, gathered on him, and began biting and stinging. Then I noticed something weird. More bugs popped into existence in the midst of the cloud near Sundancer and Labyrinth. I felt the original bugs perish as they exploded into ash. He was taking them with him. I didn't think he could help it. I could track his movements. "Bitch, here!" I shouted. She lunged out of the cloud, still astride Brutus, pulling up short to avoid trampling me. "I can see where he's teleporting," I told her. Get Judas and Angelica." She whistled, long and piercing. As if in response, Oni Lee appeared just a few feet away. "Behind you!" I pointed. Brutus whipped around, snapping and snarling, and Oni Lee had to backpedal to escape being caught in the mutant's jaws. He disappeared just a second later. "Get one dog near those guys." I pointed to Sundancer and Labyrinth. "We should join them ASAP." She nodded, whistled, and pointed. No sooner did Judas and Angelica arrive at our sides than Judas headed off to his next destination. Bitch offered me a hand. I gratefully took it, letting her help me onto Brutus's back. As we approached Sundancer and Labyrinth, the sidewalks on either side of us dropped out of existence, leaving only a bottomless pit where they had been. "What the fuck?" I murmured. The building began to rise in height, some leaning over the street and joining the others in grotesque arch and bridges. Brickwork stretched and extended into alleyways, closing them off. Then windows began to shrink and warp, leaving only flat expanse of brick, concrete and stucco for the building faces. Under our feet, the road began to shift in color, with some patches becoming paler and others darkening. They sharpened in definition as they settled into an alabaster white and jet black. A checkerboard? Brutus had to leap out of the way as one square of checkerboard suddenly rose to a height of 10 feet. As if in response, other squares began to rise and fall, each varying almost random heights. I was almost dismounted as another square appeared in a wall and slid out the side of the building in 30-foot long horizontal pillar. We reached a safe haven, an expanse of unaffected ground, 30 feet across with 2 figures in the center, Sundancer and Labyrinth. "This is you?" I asked Labyrinth, awed as I climbed down off Brutus. She didn't reply. Instead, she reached out and touched the side of my chin. The images of arches, pillars, and checkerboard patterns fell away like a house of cards. "Hallucinations," I spoke as Labyrinth made a wavering gesture towards Bitch's head. She looked at me and shook her head slowly. "They're not hallucinations?" I asked. She didn't reply. "You can't explain because you can't or don't talk," I realized, speaking my thoughts aloud. O'Neilly appeared a few feet away. I whirled and pointed. "There!" Oops. Hold on. There we go. He was stumbling, moving to avoid something that wasn't there. He was still there, trying to get his balance, and I felt more bugs appear at another point on the opposite side of us. Only he appeared 15 feet in the air and fell and landed in an awkward position, falling over. "Bitch!" I pointed. She whistled and pointed to send Angelica. O'Neilly's response was delayed, as if he couldn't even see her approaching. At first, I felt more bugs pop into existence. A second before she set her jaws on him. "There!" Bitch sent Judas next. O'Neilly's reaction was even slower, but he had time to throw himself into his back, flinging 2 knives into Judas's face and shoulders before he disappeared. "Over there!" I pointed as he reappeared. Bitch didn't even have time to give a command before there was a sound like a champagne cork being popped. O'Neilly screamed as one of his shins exploded in a spray of blood. I felt him reappear somewhere else, collapsing to the ground, while his predecessor endured having the kneecaps on his good leg shot out. I followed the sound of a chamber being reloaded to spot Coyle's sniper. He was lying on the side at the foot of the building, one arm outstretched to hold his rifle steadily. His right leg was bent the wrong way. He'd been knocked off the 3-story building, had broken a leg at the very least, and had still managed to retrieve, load, and fire his rifle. If he was willing to be that professional, I could damn well play spotter for him. "There!" I pointed to O'Neilly's direction, on the warehouse again. There were 2 more muted popping sounds, and I could see O'Neilly spin in a pirouette of sorts as a shot clipped him before he collapsed to a rooftop. He exploded in a cloud of ash once again, except I hadn't felt him appear anywhere. "He's gone," I said, "out of my range." Sundancer looked up at me, one gloved hand on her shoulder. "Good," she managed to answer. "You okay?" "He gouged my shoulder. I'll need stitches, but it's not the worst injury I've had." "Okay, man, Coyle's guy," I spoke, trying hard to organize my thoughts and priorities with the adrenaline that was pumping through me. "You gonna be all right?" "Yeah," he rasped, then he coughed. I'd have to take him at his word. "Labyrinth, watch him. Make sure he keeps breathing and that his buddy knows where he is," I said. "Sundancer, bitch, we've got to go help Neuter." A sip of water. Hive 5.8. I didn't like leaving Labyrinth behind after seeing her turn the tide of our fight against O'Neilly, but I couldn't use someone that couldn't communicate with me. Bitch, Sundancer, and I all sat astride Brutus as he headed toward the warehouse once again, my bugs lagged behind us. "We should be fighting Lung," Bitch growled. "We're not helping the freak." "What?" Sundancer asked. "Why wouldn't we help him?" "His fault if he got hurt," Bitch snarled. "And if you got hurt?" Sundancer challenged her. "You want us to leave you?" "Fuck no, but I wouldn't be surprised if you did." "We're helping him," I stated, firm. "Yeah, I'm the one telling this bug lug where to go." She slapped her hands, big lug where to go. She slapped her hands on the side of Brutus's neck a few times. I would have yelled at her, should have, maybe. Instead, I just leered forward until I was pressing against her back and spoke into his ear. "We let him die. You think Faultline's gonna let it slide? She might hurt or kill Tattletale or Regent in retaliation." My piece said. I leaned back and waited to see how she'd respond. Oh, hello, welcome back, second viewer. I don't know if it's Dengar, but welcome back. If that wasn't enough to convince her, I had no idea of what it would be. I was ready to and jumping off of Brutus's back and seeing what I could do, helping Neuter on my own. Bitch didn't reply. She didn't take us around over or through the building either. When we stopped, it was by a stairwell leading up to where Neuter had fallen. The business they had been into wasn't prostitution or slave trading. Long tables were arranged around the ground floor of the warehouses with stools lined up beside them. On those tables were shallow boxes with blocks and piles of white powder. Various tools, rulers, funnels, scales, measuring cups, and no-name brand boxes of sealable plastic bags were arranged around each station. Heroin? Cocaine? I didn't know my drugs well enough to guess. The center of the room had been left more or less clear, maybe so cars or trucks could pull in. So the employees had been wearing little to no clothing, presumably to keep the clothes clean of white dust, or maybe to keep them from pocketing any drugs themselves. The building rumbled with an impact, and I was reminded of the business at hand. Was I more distracted than usual right now? Was it the concussion? Bitch had been right before. The stairwell and what I could see of the second floor was too low for both a dog and a rider. I hopped off Bruce's back, stumbling a bit as I landed, then headed up to the stairs, taking two at a time. Neuter was lying in a puddle of blood in the midst of a bunch of thugs who were all lying down, crawling or writhing, oblivious to my existence. Seeing the thugs was enough to remind me of how dangerous it would be to touch Neuter. I was wearing gloves and leggings with padded soles, but would that be enough? The dragline silk I'd used for my costume was mostly waterproof, but the weave itself was porous, and I was worried about enough that touching his blood could mean a terminal overdose, and I couldn't risk it. That I couldn't risk it. My approach stopped short of the puddle. Neuter had a knife wound just below his shoulder blade that traced around his side, as long as my forearm and deep enough that I couldn't tell how bad the damage was. He was breathing, but his breaths were shallow enough that I almost couldn't tell. I was here. I could bend down to touch him, but I was helpless to do anything. Moments after I made contact with his skin, even with my gloves on, I'd probably be on some hallucinogenic drug trip, flopping around like a fish on dry land. Bitch and Sundancer approached from behind me, stopping at my side. Bitch, go downstairs. Check the supplies that they were using with the drugs. Look for rubber gloves, saran wrap, anything like that. If you can't find anything, look in the bathroom under the sinks. I doubt there'll be first aid kit, but if you can find one, bring it. Bitch didn't answer, but she headed down the stairs. Just to be safe as my bugs reached the building, I swept the flying ones through the rooms to help me look for first aid supplies to keep an eye on Bitch and the rest of the building. What are we doing? Sundancer asked. You're staying with him. See if you can get a response. Talk to him. I'm checking in there. I pointed to the office at the end of the hall. Just in front of me there was a gaping hole in the wall and a pile of debris, the mess Judas had made where he lunged through the sides of the building to corner Oni Lee. I had a dim recollection of what my bugs had sensed when they'd first entered the building and checked out the room. I've been more focused on the people and potential booby traps, but I remember that it could have been an office with a desk and a curtained-off area with a bed. Maybe the bed was there so the guys in charge could take turns sleeping there, ensuring that there was always someone to keep an eye on things. Maybe it was for the half-dressed employees for taking advantage of them, or so that there was a place to put the ones that accidentally overdosed while working. Entering the office, I confirmed my suspicions about the evidence of the bed, about the existence of the bed. I began stripping the badly stained sheets off. Was it odd that this place freaked me out 10 times as much as the nearly getting off by Oni Lee? Drugs had always spooked the hell out of me. One of the first times I'd ever ridden a bus, when I was around 5 or 6, I'd seen a meth head freak out, making enough of a ruckus that the driver stopped and forced him off. I never really gotten over that first impression, where just the idea of being around someone that high made me sort of anxious. It wasn't just that either. In grade school and junior high, I had classmates drop off the face of the planet, hearing only rumors and hints from other classmates or my teachers that there were drugs involved. Either my classmates themselves got caught up in things, or parents or siblings dragging the kid into the mess to the point that the kid couldn't come to school. One as bad as the other, almost from the beginning. One as bad as the other. Almost from the beginning, I had this sense of drugs in this unstoppable black hole of fucked upness that swallowed in anyone close to the addict. Yet people did it. It was something common and profitable enough that in areas like Brockton Bay, where there were as many people as unemployed as not, the ABB needed a money counting machine in this very office. Profitable enough that they had an open safe with stacks of bills inside. My bugs weren't doing much, so I set them the task of collecting the money. With a second or two of my having the thought, the mass of roaches, centipedes, and pillbugs and ants flowed into the piles of money and began pushing it all off the desk or into paper bags. Houseflies and wasps gathered around on the bills that tried to fly through the air and retrieve them. It wasn't perfect, it was a little clumsy, but it still caught me off guard just how well they were able to coordinate for something that without any conscious direction on my part. I couldn't let myself get distracted. I could put my bugs on autopilot and have them finish the job where I'd focused on more important things. Pulling off bedsheets, I uncovered a plastic sheet. This kind you used for when your kids wet the bed. Doped out drug addicts too, maybe. The top of the plastic sheet looked kind of grody, but I wasn't in a position to be picky. I pulled off the mattress, balled it up in my hands, and hurried back to the hall. Help me, I ordered Sundancer. With her help, I laid out the plastic sheet, bottom side up at Nudra's feet. By the time we had it flat and ready, Bitch was returning. Found 2 pairs of plastic gloves and some rubber gloves under a sink, she said. First aid kit too, but it feels light. Open it, I said, taking out a pair of plastic gloves. It was awkward, fitting them over my normal gloves, but I managed it. Sundancer just pulled off her costume gloves and put the plastic ones on. She was Caucasian, I noted. Pale. Tell me what's inside fast. Got some tape, bandages, thermometer, safety pins, rubbing alcohol, soap, needle, thread, I asked. No. Gauze pads? Big bandages? No. With our plastic gloves on, Sundancer and I managed to haul Neuter onto the plastic sheet. The moment she let go, Sundancer winced and reached for her shoulder, but she stopped short of actually touching it. I turned to my teammate. Bitch, go downstairs. Those people who were here took their clothes off, and my bugs say they stashed their clothes in a room behind us. Find me some purses, as many as you can grab, as fast as you can grab them. She didn't move this time. She just glared at me. Fucking move! I shouted at her. She gave me the evil eye before she left again. Bandages are going to be too small, Sundancer said as I tried to wrestle Neuter's blood-sick tail into a plastic sheet. Douse them in alcohol. Just use them to clean the injury of blood. Use the dry bandages to pat it dry so the tape can stick. Don't be afraid to get into the wound. Just be gentle. She nodded and began working on it. I grabbed the tape and began fumbling with it. 2 pairs of gloves on, and I couldn't lift the end of it. I grabbed my knife and used the edge to get the job done. Once I held the tape, I began holding the wound closed and taping crosswire across it. I could only hope I was doing the right thing here. A month of weekend first aid classes had not prepared me for this. Bitch arrived with purses and practically threw them at me. I could have gotten pissed, but Neuter couldn't afford for me to. I began emptying the purses onto the ground beside me and sorting through the contents. Pens, wallets, headphones, books, tampons, pictures, receipts, more receipts, change, keys, yet more receipts. What are you looking for? Sundancer asked. The third purse turned up what I needed, sanitary pads. I tore one open and pressed it to the wound, then began taping it down. Unasked for, Sundancer grabbed another one and opened it so it would be ready for me. Sterile, absorbent, covers more area than a bandage can. I got around to answering her question. If he lives, this teammate might give him a hard time, but it'd be better than nothing. You didn't tape it down all the way, Sundancer pointed out. Only 3 sides, I agreed, so it can breathe. Only vaguely recalled some instructions on that front. I was hoping it was right. If I failed here, what right did I have to call myself an aspiring hero? When the wound was bandaged as much as I could manage, the 3 of us bundled him up the sheet and lifted him. Bitch and Sundancer had an injured arm and shoulder, respectively, so they both took his head and shoulders while I took his feet. With agonizing slowness, we carried him down the stairs. Then, as carefully as we could manage, with a body weighing half again as much as of any of us, we draped him across Brutus's shoulders. A bone-jarring crash nearby nearly undid all of our hard work. Brutus nearly lost his footing at the impact, and I would have fallen if I hadn't already been holding on to him. A gauntleted hand as wide across as my arm span had crashed through the wall. The whole building shuddered as another hand punched through the brick wall of 20 feet from the first hole. Fingers gripped the building and pulled the entire section of the wall out in one piece.
Ooh, brother! It's WrestleMania time!
Go! I shouted at Bitch. Take him to the others. Call Telltale. Get the number for that Cape doctor. Get the medical attention for anyone who needs it. She hesitated, opened her mouth to protest. I raised, "Do not fuck with me here." There was a rumble outside as the removed section of the wall had been thrown against the ground outside. Hard. Just an instant later, half a dozen ABB members retreated into the warehouse through the hole, taking cover from the giantesses. They saw us and stopped short, wary, weapons ready but not raised or pointed at us. Lung followed his thugs into the room. He was bigger than I'd seen him at nearly 15 feet in height, and was covered in layers of scales that left him barely recognizable as human. Oh, that's a fucking wrestling entrance if there ever was one. Spear-like growth stuck out of his shoulders in what I realized were the beginning of wings. His mask had been torn off at some point, and the features of his face had been warped by this transformation. The shape of his skull and face were more cat-like than human, and his nose and mouth were a single X-shaped opening, bristling with pointed teeth that stuck in every direction. I could see why he usually wore the mask. "Bitch," I murmured, "if you don't leave now, I don't think you're going to get another chance." "But what do you want more? To fight here and now, or to make sure Faultline and the other groups don't have an excuse to do anything to our teammates?" I saw her hesitate. The fact that she had even had to think about it, I could have slapped her. Kaiser strolled in, unworried, unhurried. Lung moved like he was going to lunge for him, then stopped just in time to avoid impaling himself on the narrow blades of steel that had erupted from the ground, pointed at his heart. I wasn't sure if it penetrated his covering of scales, but if I were Lung, I don't think I would have gambled on it either. Fanja and Menja reduced their size to fit through the hole they'd made in the wall, then grew again as they had the headroom. They'd settled at a height of 18 or 20 feet. Fanja carried a small and round sword and round shield, while Menja had a spear. Or the other way around. Whatever. In the corner of my eye, I saw a bitch hop onto Brutus, then ride in the direction of the sniper team in Labyrinth, a wrapped-up neuter lying limp in front of her. Judas and Angelica remained behind, not far from Sundancer and I. Their entire bodies were taut with tension, their heads low as they glared at new arrivals. Lung surveyed the room. His men were arranged in a loose circle around us, facing us. His eyes settled on me. "Ooh," he rumbled. His words were distorted by the shape of his altered mouth, but it was easy enough to guess what he'd said. "You."
Ooh, it's WrestleMania time, brother. High 5.9, oh yeah.
"Yeah, me," I answered Lung, hoping I sounded more confident than I felt. "Some history?" Sundancer murmured. I made his crotch rot off. She turned to stare at me. Accidentally. "How do you..." she started, then stopped as Lung's growl rose in volume enough to turn her head. Angelica and Judas advanced steadily until they were on the other side of me. "Step down, Undersider." Kaiser spoke from the opposite end of the room. "My girls and I have this in hand." "Do you?" I challenged him, not breaking eye contact with Lung. "Because Lung looks like he's in pretty good shape there. You know how this works, right? He only gets stronger the longer you fight him. If you haven't finished him off by now, you're probably not going to." Lung chuckled, low and gravelly. He craned his neck to look at Kaiser, and I shivered. His neck alone was nearly as long as my torso and thicker at the base. Oh yeah, the neck! His tapering down to a more or less normal-sized head. What was creepier was that he'd bent his neck in a U-shape to look behind himself. It was a movement that a gymnast would have been hard-pressed to perform with their back. It wouldn't be long before he just wasn't recognizable as something who had once been human. The 6 of his thugs that were gathered around him looked like they were almost as scared of him as they were of us. What do you propose, then?" Kaiser asked me. "Sundancer and I will help out," I told him. I glanced at Sundancer, and then she nodded. Lung laughed again. Before I could even figure out what he'd said to me, he lunged straight at me, passing between 2 of his people, moving on all 4s. I sent the flying insects and wasp into the room to help bitch search for supplies. Then I directed him straight for Lung as I realized what he was doing. Too little, too late. Then Judas intercepted him. The pair of them rolled and tumbled, and I couldn't tell which one of them was making which snarling or growling noise. When the momentum of Judas's pounce had stopped carrying them across the floor, Lung managed to get his footing first and physically heaved Judas across the main floor of the warehouse. Judas slammed into two sets of long tables, sending clouds of white powder billowing around him. When Angelica made her move, Lung was ready for her. He caught hold of her snout and foreclaw before she could do any damage and leveraged her forward momentum to throw her too, straight at Judas. There was an almost judo or aikido style to the throw, except I doubted either of them were human enough for normal moves and techniques to apply. What was more likely, I thought, was that his reflexes and flexibility and strength were on a whole other level when this sort of thing came naturally to him. In any case, my bodyguards, if you could call them that, had been tossed aside like they were stuffed animals. Lung didn't drop on all fours again as he advanced towards me. Instead, he flexed his right hand. My eyes were drawn to the foot-long blades that tipped each finger. The ultimate let's get ready to rumble, hell yeah. Sundancer? I asked, quiet. Help me out? If I use my power, I'd probably hurt you worse than I hurt him. That line is getting old fast. Lung lunged again, and I threw myself to one side, too slow, too short a distance. With the sounds of swords being drawn out of their sheaths, a barrier of blades and spears rose up from the ground between Lung and I. I found traction on the asphalt with my hands and feet, and I managed to half crawl, half run away from him. Lung started to move around the barrier of blades, only to be blocked by another bristling growth. He roared, then leapt for the rafters up at the ceiling. I know what he was doing almost right away, and ran for the cover. Once that he had a grip up there, it would be a matter of using his grip on the steel girders that lined the ceiling to jump straight at me. I wasn't 2 paces before I knew there was no cover and I could get fast enough. Except he didn't get that far. A square pillar of steel as tall and as long as an 18-wheeler spread downward from the roof, straight at him. It caught Lung in his midsection and shoved him down to the ground. Hard. A few seconds later, the weight of the block of steel tore it from the ceiling and it was rooted in. Didn't hit anyone as it dropped down, but I could guess it would have killed someone. I could feel the impact of it striking with the ground with my bones. I looked at Kaiser. He was standing where he walked into the room, hands clasped behind his back. Fenja, Menja. Kaiser's orders wasn't shouted, but he could be heard across the warehouse if you call it an order. But the 2 18-foot-tall Valkyries seemed to know what he wanted. They advanced towards Lung with their weapons drawn, and Lung's people began slowly backing away. Felt a pang of sympathy for Lung's rank and file, mainly for the ones who had been coerced into this. They'd probably seen what Fenja and Menja were capable of earlier, but they couldn't run without risking their boss's wrath, caught between a rock and a hard place. Lung wasn't quite down and out yet. He started climbing to his feet, only to have a pyramid of crisscrossing blades and spears up around him. Blades appeared under and over his arms, just beneath his armpit, beneath his knee, and by his groin, with dozens more rising up around him. Before he could find his way out, he was trapped, buried and hidden beneath the layers of steel. Kaiser inclined his chin, looking toward the ceiling, and I saw a shimmer. The tip of a blade began to emerge from one of the iron girders above, revealing itself at a glacial pace. It was no more than a half a foot thick, but nearly 20 feet wide. I wasn't sure if it was an optical illusion from the rippling energies of Kaiser's power or not, but I thought maybe the ceiling was sagging under the weight of it. If he wasn't careful, he'd bring down the roof on our heads. Then Kaiser lowered his head to face the area where Lung was trapped, and the massive sword he'd manifested in the ceiling plunged down onto the pyramid in a heartbeat. Sparks showered as the gargantuan blade sheathed through the trap. But there was more hot metal that wasn't a result of the impact. When I looked again, I saw Lung had avoided the blade. The side of the pyramid closest to me glowing a white-hot orange, the blades curling and sagging in the intensity of the heat. He'd softened the metal enough with his pyrokinesis that he could use his monstrous strength and push his way free. Enough, at least, to avoid being divided into 2. Lung roared as he climbed free. As Kaiser raised more blades around him, Lung swung his claws and shattered his metal, sending the pieces sliding across the floor. Lung growled. You're an animal, Lung. Kaiser answered him, even without your power making you into this. Go down! As if he'd punctuated his statement, as if to punctuate his statement, a spear of solid steel erupted from the wall and slammed into Lung, carrying him into the end of the room where opposite where Judas and Angelica were. Lung managed to get a grip on the spear and move himself so the spear point wasn't pressed against his chest when it punctuated the concrete of the wall. "Your people. Animals," Kaiser intoned. Not 6 paces away from me, one of Lung's thugs let out a raw scream and collapsed to the ground. Dagger-like blades had pierced the tops of his feet mid-stride. As he used his hands to break his fall, another set of blades punched through his palms. The screams of the other thugs echoed his. He was on his hands and knees, unable to move with his hands and feet effectively nailed to the ground. "Kaiser!" I shouted. "No!" Not your business, little girl," Kaiser told me, turning in my direction. I turned an immediate step back, fearing blades would appear under my feet. "This is wrong," I said, as I watched a silver of steel sprout out of the ground and rise with a controlled speed to the base of the thug's throat. He was forced to arch his back and raise his hand to his absolute limit to avoid getting a very unnecessary tracheotomy. I glanced at Lung. He was watching what was happening, but I couldn't read his alien expression. "Wrong?" Kaiser chuckled. "As far as I'm concerned, the moment you need to fall back on morals to argue something, you've already lost the argument. This is war." Lung moved for Kaiser this time. He virtually rolled to one side to avoid an outcropping of spear points angled in a way that he might have run himself through on them, then resumed his charge. One of the giantess twins stepped in, kicking Lung into and almost through the wall. Lung bounced back almost immediately, drawing on his pyrokinesis to direct a column of blue-yellow flame at her. The other twin intercepted the fire with her shield. A few seconds later, she was stumbling back and ran away from Lung and throw her shield away to avoid having the heated metal burn her arm. Kaiser's team wasn't going to win this on their own, as much as I despised stepping in and trying to help him. "Sundancer, now would be a great time to use your power," I spoke. As I said the words, I called on every bug that was in the area and sent them towards Lung. "No, I'll burn them." "Then burn them! If you don't use your power, I can pretty much guarantee Lung will burn them worse." "Doubt it," Sundancer replied. But she raised her hands in front of her. There was a brilliant flare of light, only a fraction of a second, but enough to leave a black-blue spot in the center of my vision. There was a brief roaring as the light faded. I turned to put my focus to my bugs as another flicker of light appeared, longer and stronger than the first, again accompanied by that faint roar. "Hey, Skitter, was it?" Sundancer spoke. "Yeah?" I said. "Get back. Way back." I ran for it, pulling my mask and bringing my fingers to my mouth in the best whistle I could manage. 2 seconds later, Angelica shoved her snout between my legs. Had it been a movie, or if I'd been bitched, maybe I would have been able to slide or jump back and land on her neck or shoulders right on from there. As it was, I half fell, half rolled over to the top of her head and only barely managed to get a grip on the spike on her shoulder. I clung to that as she ran, praying I wouldn't fall and get trampled. "Angelica, stop! Stay!" I called out, hoping that she knew the command, that she'd listen. She did, slowing her pace to a walk, then stopping just by the loading bay that we'd come. Judas caught up and walked around her until he was just in front of us. He was still covered in the white dust, but it didn't seem to have any real effect on him. I hopped down from Angelica's side, ready to climb on her and jostle her into action as if Lung had made another attempt to come after me. I wasn't sure I could steer her, but with the prospect of Lung chasing me, I'd rather be moving totally uncontrolled at Angelica's speed than anything my two feet could offer. Sundancer had managed to get her power going. A ball of light, larger than a basketball, smaller than a beach ball, sat between her two hands. Light? That was it? Then I saw the floor. The warehouse had been completely raised above a flat expanse of asphalt, maybe an old parking lot, and the surface had cracked and been patched a fair bit over the years. It still bore the oil stains from the old days. Directly below Sundancer, the floor was normal. Starting around 5 feet from her, though, the ground looked wet, glassy. The asphalt was melting. She dropped her hands and the ball of light rose. Like it had a mind of its own, it darted towards Lung, zipping left and right and up and down as it moved. I saw how it rose higher and as it moved over Lung's people, who were still nailed to the floor. At one point, it moved only 10 or so feet over one of the tables, and a plastic surface table seemed to crumple up in fast motion, turning black and smoldering with the tongues of flame. I scattered my swarm, all too aware that they weren't doing a thing for Lung, knowing they'd just die when Sundancer got her orb to Lung. She didn't make it touch him, but seeing it what it had done to the table, I thought maybe that was a good thing. Lung raised a hand toward the light, and I could see heat shimmers in the air. She pushed it a little closer to him, and his legs buckled. Kaiser was apparently unwilling to let Sundancer steal the show because he brought a shaft of metal out of the wall behind Lung, shoving Lung towards the orb. Sundancer moved the ball back, but just the second or so of close proximity to the ball was enough to take the fight out of Lung. He fell on all fours, tried to move, and found the asphalt like a molten tar beneath him. Wasn't he supposed to be fireproof? Or was that immunity only to the flames he had made with his power? Or, I thought, was that ball of light Sundancer's miniature sun that hot? Yes, it is a miniature sun. That shit would be very hot. I was lingering at the exit, watching and waiting to see the outcome. My bugs were prepared and ready, lingering as close as they could get without being wiped out by the superheated air. Even with his superhuman condition, even with his pyrokinesis to maybe take the edge off the light, Lung was clearly suffering. Just a matter of time, I realized, before he collapsed. Probably, I suppose, much longer than one would think with his regeneration. Then the light of Sundancer's orb winked out. It took me a few moments of blinking the spots out of my eyes before I could make out the scene entirely. Lung was limp, his arms dangling at his sides. He was still bent over, and he might have fallen first into the tar if it wasn't for the spear of iron that was impaling him through the heart. "What did you do?" Sundancer shouted. "Obviously," Kaiser said, "I ended it. It was already over." I was under the impression very few people argued with Kaiser. Fenja and Menja joined him, one on either side of him, and neither of them was sheathing weapons or shrinking back to normal size. I took that to be a very bad sign. I was so preoccupied watching Kaiser, I almost missed what happened next. It started with as a flash of crimson in the corner of my eye.
Oh, he ain't down yet. The fight continues. Oh, yeah.
I looked and I saw Lung's wings fully unfurled like the wings of a bat, only they had silvery scales where the bat had fur. And the flesh had stretched between the fingers of the wings as deep, dark red of blood. Lung grabbed the spear that impaled his chest and snapped it with his claws. He stood, his entire midsection seemed to arrange so he stood another foot or two taller. Taking hold of the fragments that was still embedded in his chest, he slowly slid out. Once it was free, he cast it aside. It clattered to the floor of the warehouse. We were so quiet you could hear the ringing of steel as it settled onto the ground.
Oh, round two, baby.
"Sundancer, run!" I shouted, breaking the stillness. I sent my bug swarming to Lung. Anything to block his vision, distract him for even a second. The events that followed seemed to happen in slow motion. Lung repeated what he'd been trying to do as the fight opened, only nothing seemed capable of getting in his way now. He was faster, stronger, and more maneuverable. He lunged towards Kaiser, only using his wings to carry him effortlessly above a growth of steel blades. Reaching Kaiser, he slammed the man into the wall. Kaiser went limp, but Lung repeated the process, banging him against the brick wall of the warehouse half a dozen times in a span of seconds. When he was done, he flung Kaiser away like a toy. Fenja had to drop her spear to catch Kaiser in her arms, which seemed to be exactly what Lung wanted. Lung did the same I explode trick he'd done to wipe out all of my bugs in the first encounter with him, only it was 10 times the explosion, 10 times as big. The two giantesses staggered back, which gave Lung the opportunity to dart across the floor and drive his flattened claws into Menja's belly like a knife. As he withdrew his claws, she collapsed. "Nessa!" Fenja screamed. Lung ignored her and started walking towards Sundancer and I. Fenja rushed to her sister's side, still carrying Kaiser. Sundancer began forming her miniature sun once more, with increasingly frequent flickers of light and fire gathering her hands. Lung boomed. He raised his bloody claw, and the flame when Sundancer's hands had dissipated, slipping out of her grasp like greased eels. She tried once more, and again he thwarted her with almost casual ease. Before she could make a third attempt, Lung blasted her with a torrent of roaring flames. For 2, 3, 4 seconds, the fire washed over her, consumed her. When he stopped, there were tongues of flames dancing in the asphalt around her. Even her costume had fire lingering on it, but both she and her costume were untouched. She, at least, was fireproof, or she'd had to be, to avoid being burned by her own power. She wasn't, however, invincible. As the flames of his attack dissipated, Lung was made visible again, revealing to be standing in front of her. He barely seemed to care she was there as he backhanded her aside. Then he turned his attention to me. Just me left, really. I swallowed hard, drew my very underwhelming knife and stood facing Lung. Please don't burn me. Please, please. Look at this knife and see it as an insult. An excuse to trounce me physically. Angelica started snarling at Lung. She took a step towards him. No, I ordered. Back! The snarl ceased and she looked at me. Back, I repeated. When I took a step towards Lung, she didn't follow. A powder-covered Judas stood 15 feet away, tense but not approaching either. Good, no use in anyone getting hurt. There was nothing else she could do. Hell, I was almost positive there was nothing else I could do. My bugs gathered on Lung, but as far as I could tell, there was no skin anymore. No flesh to bite, nothing to sting. Lung rumbled with a low, guttural chuckle and let a brief flame wash over him, wiping this form out of existence. I dispersed the bugs in his vicinity that hadn't had a chance to touch him and get burned for their trouble. No point. Detrimental, almost. Then Bitch, riding Brutus, bounded toward from the hole in the ceiling and crashed into Lung. Bitch, I shouted too late. No! Once he got over the shock of the initial impact, Lung used one hand to grab Bitch from where she sat on Brutus's back and took a hold of Brutus by the neck with his other. Heaving his arm and Brutus to his left side, then to his right, Lung casting the dog head over heels through the air. Judas and Angelica began to move forward, but Lung stopped when Lung elicited a scream of pain from Bitch. Lung rumbled. Stop, I shouted, stepping forward again. I'm the one you want, aren't I? It always sounded so good when you heard it in the movies. As I realized what I'd said, it only sounded stupid. He advanced towards me, carrying Bitch like a careless 7-year-old might carry a cat. I backed away effortlessly, but his stride was long enough for him to close the gap effortlessly. He grabbed me and hefted me into the air, lifting me above his head, and as he could look at me. He couldn't talk, so I couldn't even fall back on the tired old cliche of getting him to monologue. Fuck. He had my neck encircled with the thumb and forefinger, 2 claws at my ribcage, and his pinky finger at my midsection, just below my waist. He squeezed a fraction tighter, and I groaned. The fabric of my costume was preventing the edges of his claws from cutting into me, but it wasn't reinforced to stop me from being crushed. I directed a bug into his eye. It stayed there, wings fluttering in staccato. It was annoying enough for him to drop Bitch and deal with it. He didn't give her a chance to escape, though. Before he dealt with the bug, he shoved her against the ground and stepped on her, holding her down with his clawed foot. That done, he used the points of his claw to pick the bug from his eye socket. He chuckled again, low, gravelly, as he examined the cockroach impaled on his claw tip. Oh, cockroach? He lowered his arm so I was at his eye level. Then he squeezed again, weaker than the first time. Shook me not as hard as he could have. Then his arm sagged again, until my toes were brushing the ground. After shaking me, his grip had loosened, and he hadn't really tightened, so I managed to get my knee against the base of his palm and shove him backwards, push myself free. My feet touched asphalt, and I backed up a few steps. He rumbled. Don't fucking underestimate me, I snarled in response. I don't know if he heard me. I hadn't even finished the sentence before I had to skip backward just 2 steps to avoid being crushed beneath him as he collapsed face first into the asphalt. Bitch, you okay? She was picking herself off the ground. She nodded. What happened? She asked. I sheathed my knife and reached for my cell phone with one hand. My other hand I extended with the palm up. A cockroach settled on it. Wasn't sure it would work or it'd be enough. Took a bit of a caterpillar, had a roach swab it in a pool of blood neuter felt left upstairs, and mashed the thing into Lung's eye. Big and tough as he is, a drug that's strong with the mucus In the mucous membrane of the eye, so close to the brain, apparently it's enough. Bitch folded her arms, looking down at Lung. Then she looked at me. Now what? It was a surprisingly apt question coming from her. Didn't we just leave him here? Did we just leave him here? He'd be all better in a matter of minutes. There were options. I just didn't like any of them. I dialed Tattletale's phone, but it was Regent who answered. Hey, he said. A, lemon, I said. Seagrass, he replied. You wouldn't believe it. We found one of Bakuta's workshops. The stuff she has here is crazy. No time to chat. I need to talk to Tattletale. Fast. She's checking the place for booby traps. Distractions probably aren't a good idea. It's kind of important, I said, looking down at Lung. Right. Let me take a sip of water real quick. 2 seconds later, Tattletale's voice was on the other end. Hey, quick question. I have to be sure, which is why I'm calling you. Lung heals, right? Yeah, wait, Lung's there? Unconscious at my feet. But I don't know how long, so answer fast. He heals. He's already healing for what I did to him from last time, right? Right, he'll heal pretty much anything, given time, provided he isn't dead. Lose an arm, he grows it back in a few months. Thanks, that's all I needed to know. I said, good luck with the booby traps. I hung up. Then I looked down at Lung. I drew my knife. Why the knife? Bitch asked. I think anyone else might have sounded concerned. She just sounded curious. I'm ending this. I grabbed one of the larger spikes that framed Lung's face and heaved it to one side, so his accordion-like neck was outstretched, face upturned. No time to be delicate about it. I had no idea how strong the toxins in Neuter's blood were or how fast Lung's biology would process it. I jammed the knife into Lung's eye socket. His head and consequently his eyes weren't as large as you'd think in proportion to the rest of his frame, but the tissue around it was tough. I had to leverage the knife back and forth before I was able to pry his eyeball out. It was hot enough hot to the touch as I held it in the palm of my hand, no bigger than a ping pong ball. The second eye was faster, though, no less messy. When I was done, I stood, sheathed my knife, and backed away from Lung's body. Shouldn't I feel worse about this? Should I feel sick or grossed out or disturbed by the morality of it? I didn't feel cold, the way Gru had described. It just felt like something I had to do. I glanced at the 2 eyebrows clasped in my hand, then put them out of my mind. I surveyed the room. Priorities? I asked Bitch first. The dogs are okay? If I place them second to anyone else but her, or forgot to ask, I got a feeling Bitch would mind. They'll heal when they turn back to normal. Sundancer? I asked. Sundancer was lying on her side, one arm pressed against the shoulder Oni Lee had stabbed. I'm okay. That was everyone I gave a damn about, leaving only Fenja, Menja, and Kaiser. I looked across the room and called out, Fenja? The giantess nodded. Get your sister to the hospital or whichever good doctor you guys use. Get your boss taken care of. She stood without giving a response. Her sister had shrunk enough for her to cradle in her arms. Kaiser, for his part, was slung over her shoulder, limp. Oh, Fenja. She paused. I'll leave it to you to make the call, but if you think Kaiser has a sense of honor, maybe point it out it would be bad for him to push the point on dogfighting thing after we deal with Lung for him, saved his life. After we dealt with Lung for him, saved his life. She nodded, then ducked through the opening in the wall. I stepped towards Sundancer and offered her a hand to help her out. She flinched away. Oh, my hands were bloody. I dropped the offered hand to my side. Let's go, I suggested. Fucking hype as shit. Hype as shit. Little 15-year-old girl, or 16-year-old girl kills a fucking steel dragon. Fucking badass. Badass. Alright, hold on. Bathroom break time, and I'll be right back. One moment. Alrighty. Everyone ready to continue? Everybody ready? I welcome back. I welcome you back. Just clean my glasses real quick. All right. Hive 5.10. I just want to see. Hold on. I just want to see how many parts are in this arc. Oh, shit! We're on the last one. Nice. Before the interlude. Fucking cool. All right. Awesome. Nice. We might actually get to do some of 6 today. Maybe. Who knows? We'll see. We'll see. Hive 5.10. Brockton Bay 911, what's your emergency? Multiple injured, I said, glancing at the nearest street sign. Warehouse at Whitemore and Sunset. Send police and capes too. These guys are ABB members. There was a briefest of pauses. That's Whitemore and Sunset? Whitemore and Sunset, yes. Listen, the leader of the ABB, a parahuman by the name of Long, is incapacitated at the scene, but that won't be entirely true for long. He's drugged and blinded, but the drugs will be out of his system before too long. You're a cape? She asked. Can I get your identification? I repeat, I ignored her. He's drugged and blinded, but only the blindness will be a factor when the first responders arrive on the scene. Warn them to be careful. You can also tell them a second parahuman calling himself Oni Lee was present, but fled after being injured. He still may be in the area. I understand. The Protector will be informed before they arrive on scene. I've got ambulances and police and PRT teams on the way. Can I please get your identification? I hung up. I can't believe you carved out his eyes, Sundancer said. We were walking briskly back towards where we left Labyrinth. He'll heal, I pointed out, eventually. You blinded someone who was helpless to fight back. That's kind of fucked up. I couldn't say more than that. Fucked up or not, it was necessary. I could have dealt with it if I'd known we left him there and he got back to business as usual by the end of the day. I'd stopped him best as I was able to. Okay, alright, I was willing to admit that maybe the means were a little suspect. I'd fought alongside some fucked up people. I'd maimed him. By letting Fenja, Menja, and Kaiser go, I'd sort of condoned what they'd done to Lung's men. But in the end, what I wanted to do when I wanted to be a superhero, I'd taken down a horrible person. I just hoped that the heroes could clean up the mess and get Lung behind bars for a good time. Hey, bitch, I said, why'd you come back? I couldn't phrase it better without offending her, but I wanted to know why she'd come back when she was supposed to be taking Neuter and Coil Soldier to a doctor. Bitch was sitting tall astride Brutus. She seemed to get my meaning. The other soldier said he was a trained medic, told me he could handle it, so I came back to fight. Ah, I said, got it. Bitch wasn't lying. I saw as we approached the rest of our group, Neuter was bandaged and awake, while the other soldiers were lying down unconscious, maybe drugged for the pain. You made it. Neuter grinned. Barely, I admitted. You okay? I'm tougher than I look, he responded. Benefit of my, unique biology. Cool, I replied, feeling lame for not having a better reply, but I couldn't think of anything to say that it wouldn't sound like I was trying too hard or worse to sound sarcastic. This fella says you guys probably saved my life. Neuter jerked a thumb toward one of Coil's guys that he was awake. Honest, I'm having a hard time believing you're up and talking right now, the medic replied. Anyways, thanks, Neuter said, before moving from me to Sundancer to bitch, then back again. No problem, I answered him, feeling lame for not having a better or more suitable reply. Embarrassed, I looked for a response to change the subject. Look, we should get out of here in the next few minutes. Capes, cops, and ambulances are on their way to deal with the aftermath. All right, Neuter said. But I have to ask, a small army of roaches drop those off? He is smiling as he pointed to a spot near where he was lying. A stack of paper bags were organized in a pile. I forgot I did that, I admitted. Didn't feel right to leave the ABB's money behind if we wound up retreating, so I had Bugs haul it out of there. Everyone might as well take a bag. Can take it? Neuter asked. You sure? I shrugged in response. The money didn't matter much to me. Considered a bonus, thanks for helping. It's not exactly divided to be fair, so no insult intended if any of them end up being a bag full of ones. No complaints, Neuter said. He reached out with his tail and used it to encircle and pick up a bag. Coil's guy gave him a hand in standing up, and you could see him wince and huff out of breath in effort. He swayed a bit on his feet, then put a hand on Labyrinth's shoulder to steady himself. Sundancer grabbed the bag, and Coil's medic/spotter grabbed two. Labyrinth didn't reach for one, so I walked over, grabbed one, and held it out for her. She didn't respond. I'll hold that for her, Neuter offered. She okay? She's pretty much normal. For her, anyways. He claimed the bag, leaving 3 for Bitch and I, but nobody was complaining or pointing that out. You guys need a ride? I asked. Neuter shook his head, then pointed to a manhole cover a ways down the roof. We'll head back to one of our hideouts from there. Familiar territory for me. Is that a good idea with your injury? I mean, stating the obvious, but it's gonna be pretty gross down there. He smiled. Can't get infections. My biology's toxic to bacteria and parasites, I think. Never been sick, that I can remember. Of course. Now I felt dumb for making Sundancer use the alcohol to sterilize him, throwing the extra mile with the sanitary pads to ensure that what I was using was clean. And you guys? I asked Coil's guy. Ride? We've got one, but thanks. The medic bent down, bound his buddy's wrists, then pulled the loop of his arms over his head, so he was effectively giving his buddy a piggyback. He took another second to arrange his guns, then headed through the same alley that Kaiser, Fenja, and Menja had gone through before the fight started. Sundancer was going the opposite way, so she said a brief goodbye and left. Neuter and Labyrinth were walking in the same direction as Bitch and I, so we walked together. Labyrinth walked like she was in a daze, with Neuter leading her along by the hand like she was a child. It's interesting not just to see the kind of interaction between them, but noting that her gloves looked like cloth and he could presumably risk drugging her, unless she was immune. A consequence of her ability? He caught me looking and smiled and shrugged. Autistic? I guessed. He shook his head. No, though we thought that at first. Seems that she was a normal kid until her powers showed up. Since then, she's been off on her own little world, more or less. A little worse right now, I think, after seeing me hurt. That happens? I asked, gesturing my head, unable to come up with an inoffensive and simple way of phrasing it. He shrugged. Sometimes getting powers fucks up your body. He gestured to himself using his tail with still holding his paper bag. Sometimes it fucks with your head. Bad luck, but you deal with the cards you're dealt. Oh, I replied. I wasn't sure how to respond. A cold, quiet horror crept up on me. My powers had something to do with my brain. I could remember how crazy I'd felt after my powers showed up, that torrent of nightmare images, signals, and details from my bugs. I still had bad dreams about it. How close had I come to being like that permanently? He grinned. It's cool. She's really fond of us, and we're attached to her too. She has her lucid moments when she's let us know that she's cool with the status quo. Sure, she's had bad days where she's dead to the world, but all of our powers have drawbacks, yeah? Yeah, I echoed him. Though I couldn't think of any drawback to my power, that even came close. I think we're okay where we're at, hey Al? You've been happy since we got you out of that place? Labyrinth kind of stirred from her daze and looked at him. Yeah, Neuter grinned. You can tell she does the stuff. You can tell because the stuff she does with her power is prettier these days. He gestured at the manhole cover. And this very part ways. Labyrinth glanced down where he was pointing. A moment later, a tracery of silver lines spiderwebbed out across the manhole cover, extending and folding like veins. As the lines met and sanctioned off parts of the roads, those bits of roads lifted and flipped over, revealing a white marble texture on the undersides. When sufficiently surrounded by expanse of cracked white marble, the manhole flipped over, revealing a silvery underside, and then popped open on an unseen hinge. A spiral stairway of more marble or ivory led down into the depths. The walls had a white faint glow to them. Pretty cool, huh? Neuter replied. When he stepped down onto the stair, it was solid under his foot. He held up the paper bags and said, Thanks, guys. Sure thing, I said. Later. The manhole shut behind them, and almost immediately the white around the manhole began to fade. I looked up where Bitch sat on one-eyed Brutus. Angelica and a still dusty Judas stood behind her. She offered me a hand up onto Brutus's back. There were a lot of drawbacks to having a mask or helmet that didn't cover my entire head. If I sat myself down and put the extra hours to finish my mask and expand the armored sections, maybe I wouldn't have gotten that concussion that was proven to be such a pain in my ass. The upside, though, was that it felt awesome to have the wind blowing in my hair as we rode down the empty streets. The perfect wind down from the crazy adrenaline rush that had come with groups against Oni Lee and Lung within minutes of each other. I closed my eyes and let the tension flow out of me. We rode like that for a few minutes. Bitch took turns and moved sort of aimlessly as she headed east, towards the water and the beaches. Maybe she was taking evasive action in case we were being followed. Maybe she just wanted to ride. I didn't really care. I was a little disoriented when we finally stopped. Brutus padded through the sand as he stepped onto the beach. Bitch hopped down and I followed her cue. It was still early afternoon, so the beach was deserted, and it wasn't the sort of beach that saw much tourists anyway. A concrete wall separated the beach from the roadside above us, and a yawning hole with the rusty remains of what had once been a grate marked the exit of various storm drains beneath the dock. Trash, rotted leaves, and one or two needles had filtered down to the sand below the drain. Go home, bitch ordered the dogs. One by one they followed into the drain. I guess they would let the transformation subside before they returned to the loft on their own. Then bitch pulled off her mask. She gave me a derisive look. What? You gonna change? Can't walk back like that. I don't have a change of clothes on me or stashed anywhere. That's fucking stupid, she answered me. I wasn't thinking about ahead where I decided to go. Sue me. I challenged her. What are you wearing under that? Tank top and stretch shorts? She looked around. It's not that cold. I sighed and unstripped my armor to unzip my costume at the back. I pulled it off far easier than putting it on, and bundled it so all the identical parts of the mask and armor were hidden beneath the fabric. The sand was damp and clammy underneath my bare feet. When bitch reached for my face, I startled. She put one hand on the side of my face for just a fraction of a second. I thought something incredibly awkward was about to happen. Then she wrenched my hand enough of a tilt that it was almost horizontal. It looked like someone tried to hang you. What? I asked. She touched the side of my neck, but it wasn't possible to see that part of myself in a mirror. I didn't realize what she was talking about after a moment's thought. I pulled up the side of my tank top, and sure enough, there was a red-black bruise on my stomach and waist. Hiking up my top a bit more, I found another at my ribs. I knew there would be another near my armpit and one encircling my neck. I had a giant fucking handprint on my body, courtesy of Lung. I let out a loud groan, touching my neck where I felt tender. No way can I hide this from my dad. My good mood was dashed to the winds as we suddenly started trudging back to the loft. It was made of all more the unpleasant because I was underdressed and barefoot, and the ground was cold beneath my feet. I shivered and hugged my arms to my body as best as I could while keeping my costume bundled up and paper bags of money to my hand. Something warm settled over my shoulders. I looked at this bitch as she finished draping her jacket over me. As she drew back, her eyebrows furrowed, glancing at me. I wrangled the bags and bundles of my costume so I could get my arms through the sleeves and do up to the buttons. It was a canvas-down jacket with a fur rough collar, but I had the wrong size for me and it was heavy. The pockets I found as I tried to jam my hands in there were filled with stuff. A mess of plastic bags, chocolate bars, protein bars, a juice box, pellets that ground together what I guess were dog treats or dog food. Not exactly cape supplies. All in all, it was almost uncomfortable. But it was warm. Thank you, I told her, floored by a gesture. You need something to cover your neck. She looked bothered. People would stare. Doesn't matter. Thank you. Now for a smile. You already said that. She switched from looking bothered to looking angry. It's mine, I can take it back. Of course, I said. Then to be safe, I offered, do you want to? She didn't reply, leaving me absolutely baffled. Why was it that I thanked someone like my dad for giving me a gift when it felt like it sounded sarcastic or lame no matter how I tried to say it, but the one damn time I was 95% sure I was sincere that as I felt, it was with bitch and she didn't buy it. Worried anything I could say would rub her the wrong way, I defaulted to silence as I found myself doing more and more often with her. It wasn't a short trip and my feet still felt the heat leaching out of my body as I took every step on the pavement, but the core of my body was warm and it was enough to keep me going. Like that, we made our way back to the loft. She unlocked the door and let us in. I shouted for Brian and Lisa, but no voice greeted me in return. Others weren't back yet, which made sense since Gru would have picked up Tattletale and Regent before they got back, and it hadn't sounded like Tattletale's team was close to wrapping things up when I'd called. Bitch led the way up to the loft, and the second I was up there, I took off my jacket. I took off the jacket and wordlessly handed it to her. She was still glaring at me. What could I do? What could I say? It seemed like everything I did pissed her off, sent the wrong signal. I returned to my room in the loft and dug through the shipping bags I still had in there, finding a loose pair of jeans and a long-sleeve shirt to pull over my top. No clean socks, sadly, but there was some covers laid on the bed. I grabbed some and dragged them behind me to the living room where a bitch was watching TV. She gave me the evil eye, but I didn't complain as I got myself bundled with the covers on the other couch. She had the remote and I was willing to let her have it. She channel surfed relentlessly, setting on an action movie for 5 minutes, then started surfing again when ads started and didn't go back to it. It wasn't too interesting to watch, but I didn't mind. I lay back, thinking back to the events of the day, the conversation, the tidbits of info. I almost dozed off, and my lazy train of thought stumbled onto something I was afraid I'd forgot if I let myself go the rest of the way to sleep. I forced myself to open my eyes and sat up a bit. Bitch, I risked drawing her attention, hoping she'd calm down a bit. She looked at me. When we were talking a little bit ago, I thanked you. Did that sound sarcastic to you, or what? You getting on my case again? No, I raised my hands to stop her. Not what I was trying to do. I'm just wondering. Keep wondering to yourself. She snapped. When she turned her attention back to the TV, her channel surfing was cranked up a notch. I'll pay you to answer me. I tried. She looked at me. The money we grabbed, you can keep all of it. Her eyes narrowed. We're supposed to split our take 5 ways. We earn that, right? Both of us. I won't tell the others if you don't. And I'm saying you can have it all. I'm not sure how much it is, but it'd be yours. Is this a trick? No trick, just answer my question. You can even tell me to get lost after I'll go to my room and and grab a nap or something. She leaned back and put the hands with the remote in her lap, glaring at me. I took that for consent. So, what I was asking before, when I said thanks, did you think I was sarcastic? Did I think I was genuine or what? Dunno. You mean you didn't know, you can't remember, or I said I dunno? Fine. I sighed. Whatever. Money's yours. That easy? I shrugged. You said you'd get lost after I asked, she pointed out. I nodded, gathering the covers and retreated to my room. I didn't nap, though. Instead, I stared at the iron girders that framed the ceiling, deep in thought, thinking about my conversation with Neuter and Labyrinth. I was still sorting through my thoughts when the rest of the gang returned. I ventured out of the room, still bundled in a blanket, to greet them. Brian gave me a winning smile as he pulled off his helmet, and I got some attention for having the most noteworthy injury of the afternoon. As Alec, Brian, and Bitch started talking their individual adventures, Lisa pulled me aside. We wound up walking to the kitchen. Lisa put a kettle on as she asked me, "You okay?" Not really hurt, ugly as this looks. I think I'm feeling better about the school thing. But you're distracted by something. I was talking to Neuter. You know Labyrinth's kind of out of it because of her powers, right? You want to know if there's anything wrong with you that you don't know about. No, I shook my head. Wait, is there? Nah. What's up? Bitch. Oh. I've been thinking, but I don't want to build up some theory in my head, making an assumption, embarrass myself. Tell me what you're thinking, and I'll tell you if you're wrong. She's really good at reading body language, right? She could read Brian when he was blurred by his darkness with a mask on. It's what? Some kind of minor power of hers? Some of it's natural ability, some of it, yeah, and her power is adjusted to how she thinks, so she can communicate better with her dogs. Right. I glanced down to the hall where the others were talking, or rather where Brian and Alec were talking and Bitch was standing there. That's the thing. What I'm thinking is maybe when her power gave her the ability to understand dogs, it overwrote something else, fucked up her ability to deal with people. Lisa turned and got some mugs out of the cupboard. She gave me an apologetic half smile. Yeah, something like that. So what? She can't read expressions or tone? All the cues we give to others as part of a regular conversation, she doesn't get them. She probably couldn't learn them within a year of concerted effort. It's not just she doesn't get it. The most basic interactions are messed up by the canine psychology that's hardwired into her head. You smile at her and ask her how she's doing. Her first thought is that you're baring your teeth at her in anger, and she has to remind herself you aren't. But even after that, she's probably wondering if you're being sarcastic or condescending or kind or whatever. She knows you aren't shouting at her from your tone of voice, but we don't always raise our voices when we're angry, you know? Yeah.
And she falls back on the one thing she does get, canine behavior, because it does work on a level. Birds for dominance, eye contact, peck hierarchies, and establishing territory, all just bids for dominance, eye contact, peck hierarchies, and establishing territory, all adjusted and adapted to her human life. So she's really not a sociopath. No, not so much. Why did you say anything? I realized belatedly that I sounded accusatory. Maybe I was right to. Because she knows if she heard about it, and for reasons I don't know, the boss wants her to stick with us. She spent her whole life accepting the fact she had a shitty childhood, and it made her into a screwed-up person. Her dogs are the only things that's normal and right for her. If she found out the reason she's so messed up in the very same way if she found out that the reason she's so messed up is the very same thing that makes her so close to her dogs, she let the thought hang. Got it, I replied. So, not another word of this, please, unless it's absolutely necessary and you're absolutely 100% positive she's not going to overhear. Do the others know? I don't think it would change much, and I don't trust that these two keep a secret. Brian is, I don't want to say too honest, but he's transparent and bitch can read him. Alec would forget and let it slip as a part of a joke. He doesn't get the gravity of this stuff sometimes. Okay. She poured a cupboard and stirred it, then handed me a mug of Ovaltine. She got the other mugs arranged in a tray and carried it through the living room. I stayed where I was to think. I was reminded of a non-fiction book I'd read where a kid got halfway through school before his teachers realized he was illiterate. He did it by being the class clown by acting out. Was bitch the same? The violence and hostility could be a cover to distract her own inability to interact, at least partially. I had guessed a fair bit of it was genuine, though. She had had a crappy childhood, and she had lived on the streets and fought tooth and nail to avoid arrest. But at the end of the day, as awkward as I felt day-to-day interactions, she was 100 times worse off.
Interlude time, baby!
Interlude 5. This is what you wanted? The teenager with scruff on his chin and his hood handed over the paper bag. Broad hands with ruined, rotten brown fingernails pawed through the contents.
It is. Here.
The voice was slightly accented, the words, and sounded very careful, as though he was not comfortable with English. The man reached out, and his eyebrows widened as a fold of bills was pressed into his hands. This is more than I thought it would be.
Are you complaining?
The young man shook his head. Gregor the snail put his hands into his pocket as if to hide the fingernails engrossed and scabbed the back of his hands. Each of the hard growths, which might have been shell or scale, none had a silver, larger than a silver dollar, had prominent spiral shape to it. Uzumaki. As much as he could tuck his hands into his pockets, he was unable to hide his face. He had no hair on his head, not even an eyebrow or eyelashes, and the hard growth crushed his face like a terminal case of acne. Most strange and disconcerting of all was the fact that his pale skin was translucent enough that one could see shadows of his skeleton, his teeth, and a tongue in his mouth.
As you can see,
Gregor said without any affection,
it would be hard for me to walk into a store and make simple purchases. I do not like to rely on my friends like this. Makes me feel indebted to them, and that is not good for friendship. If you are interested in repeating this sort of transaction, being on call to run errands for me could be arranged.
Really? The guy rubbed his chin. For how long?
Until I called you and you were unable or unwilling to run my errand. If this happens more than once, or if the reason was not good, I would find someone else. I did with my last individual.
You didn't hurt him or anything?
No, I did not. He decided he would rather spend the evening with his girlfriend. I have not called him again.
This won't be anything illegal.
No drugs, no prostitutes, no weapons.
So you call me, I run out and grab your groceries or clothes or takeout or shampoo or whatever, and you pay me $3.
That is 4. I do not have hair, so you will not need to concern yourself with shampoo.
Right. Sorry, so $400 each time? What's the catch?
No catch. I have money. I like things to be convenient. Only one small chance of trouble. My first assistant. She quit because she concerned that my enemies would use her to get to me. I will not deny this is possible.
You have enemies?
Yes. but there has not been a case where any of my assistants ran into trouble with them.
Have any of them run into trouble at all?
The last assistant, the boy with the girlfriend, he thought he could get more money because he could go to police and tell them what he knew of me. He was lucky to try this when I was in a generous mood. I dissuaded him. He worked for 2 months after that with no complaint. We were not friendly, it was pure business. I would recommend gently that you do not try the same thing.
Hey, live and let live, right?
That is a good saying.
Okay, I'm wanting to go to college this fall, and this sounded like a hell of a lot better than working minimum wage for 50 hours a week. Here, my cell phone number. He handed over his phone. Gregor the snail took a second to put his number in his phone.
I have it. I will call.
They parted ways. Gregor walked down the side of the street of downtown Brockton Bay with the hood of his sweatshirt casting his face in a shadow. Anyone who happened to cross past him and look beneath his hood were quick to glance away, embarrassed, spooked. Those that saw him from a distance knew him as monstrous as well, but in a different way. To them, he was simply one of the morbidly obese, a man in his late 20s or early 30s, nearly 3 times the weight he should be for his 5 feet and 10 inches of height. His weight, he knew, was one of the rare things in the modern world that someone could use to mock him openly. It had taken him years to come to peace with this, with being one of the monsters. As he came to his destination, the throbbing pulse of music reached his ears. The club sat 2 blocks away from Lord Street, and there was a line extending around the side of the building. Glowing yellow letters in an almost intentionally plain script spelled out Pelican. He skipped the line and headed straight for the door. A burly Hispanic doorman with a beard tracing the edges of his jaw undid the chain fence to let him through. What the hell? One of the girls near the front complained. We've been waiting for 45 minutes. You let that fat fuck through like that? Out of the line, the doorman said, his voice bored. The hell? Why? You just dissed the owner's brother, fuckwit. The doorman told her. Out of the line. You and your friends are banned. Gregor smiled and shook his head. The line the doorman had pulled was bullshit, of course. He wasn't the owner's brother. But it was nice to see one of the assholes getting what was coming to them. He had worked as a bouncer for clubs that wanted some more exotic and attention-getting way back when he was first getting on his feet. So he knew that the line you saw out the door was as really an indication of how many people were inside. An empty club could have a line of people waiting to get in to give the right image. Even though it was a Tuesday night, Palanquin had no such need for deceptions. It bustled with people. Gregor carefully navigated the crowds of dancers and people holding their drinks until he reached a stairwell guarded by a bouncer. As with the front door, his admittance to the stairs was automatic, unquestioned. The upstairs balcony wasn't filled with people, and those that were present, a dozen or so, were almost boneless in their lethargy. Mostly girls, they lay prone on the couches and in booths through the balcony that overlooked the dance floor. Only 3 people were more or less alert as Gregor approached. Gregor, my boy, Nutter approached from ear to ear. Gregor caught the briefest flash of disgust on his face of one of the girls sitting with Nutter as she looked up at him. She was a blonde with blue lipstick and pink highlights in her hair. Had Gregor been working as a doorman, he would have checked her ID, double-checked it, and even if it did look real, he would have kicked her out anyway for being too young. She couldn't have been older than 16. Still, that was roughly how old Nutter was, and he couldn't hardly fault the boy for being interested in someone his own age. The other girl, dark-haired, had a European cast to her features. She showed no such distaste. When she smiled at him, there was no sign of expression that was forced. That was both rare and interesting.
I brought you dinner, Gregor said.
Good man, pull up a chair.
The others will want their food as well.
Pull up a chair, come on, I got these stunning girls here and they're not believing me that I'm telling them about some of the coolest jobs we pulled. I need backup here, bro.
I do not think it is a good idea to be talking about these things, Gregor said.
He stayed standing. Nutter reached for the bag and grabbed a sandwich from inside. It's cool. Faultline joined the conversation a while ago, so she's obviously okay with it. You aren't going to tell, right, Laura? Mary? Each girl shook her head as Nutter asked them by name. That Gregor labeled the dark-haired girl as Laura, then the girl with the blue lipstick as Mary.
If Faultline said it was fine, Gregor said.
He took the bag back from Nutter and found his own sandwich.
Laura and Mary, I am sorry, the other sandwiches I have are spoken for. I could offer you some of my own if you would like.
That's okay, I'm not hungry, Laura replied. I like your accent, is that Norwegian? Oh shit. I didn't know Gregor. Whatever. He's Scandinavian. Fuck. Oh, he's ice. Gregor finished his first bite, swallowed, and shook his head. I am not sure, but I have spoken to an expert and he says the other language I speak is Icelandic. You don't know? No, Gregor replied. His brusque answer only stalled the conversation for a moment before Neuter got it going again. Okay, bro, tell these girls who we went up against last month. The toy box job, Gregor asked. With the Tinker Black Market, there was nobody. The other one, the job in Philadelphia. Oh, Chevalier and Mirrodin. Neuter clapped his hands together, rocking back in his seat. Told you. And you beat them, the dark-haired girl said, disbelieving. We didn't lose. Neuter crowed. It was a close call. Gregor added his own 2 cents. Chevalier is leader of Protectorate in Philadelphia. Mirrodin leads the Protectorate in Chicago. These are both these people whole world recognizes. They got positions protecting big cities in America because they are strong, because they are smart and talented. We got the job done as we always do and we walked away. Neuter laughed. Pay up. Neither Laura nor Mary looked bothered as they reached into their pocket and purse, respectively, and fished out some bills. What was the bet? Gregor asked. I told them they didn't have to pay if I was lying. And if you weren't lying, they pay more? No penalty. I got company and conversation for a while. Neuter smiled. He reached up for the back of the booth, grabbed a bag, then sat there and fished out a pair of plastic spoons and a bottle of water. With a water dropper he retrieved it from his pocket, he siphoned water from the bottle and placed a few drops in each spoon. The final step was dipping his tongue in each droplet of water. Lick it up, he told the girls. That's all? Laura asked him. It's enough. Any more and you might be out for an inconveniently long time. That right there, Neuter pointed to the spoon with the tip of his tail. It's a little less than an hour of psychedelic tripping. No hangover, no side effects, it's not addictive, and you can't overdose on it. Trust me, I tried to make someone overdose before, a combat situation, and I couldn't make it happen. Mary was the first to take the spoon and pop it into her mouth. Moments later, her eyes went wide, and she fell limp against the back of the booth. Hey, Laura said, turning to Gregor. She reached into her pocket, finding a receipt and pen, and scribbled on the blank backside of the paper. She handed it to him. My number, if you want to talk or you know someone else. Or you know, something else. She winked at him and then popped the spoon into her mouth. Gregor blinked in mild confusion as her head lolled back. Looks like you made a good first impression, Gregster. Neuter chuckled. Maybe, Gregor said. He put half the sandwich that remained back in the paper bag, then balled up the wrapper. After the moment's hesitation, he crumpled the receipt with Laura's number into the ball. He pitched it into a trash can halfway across the room. Hey, what gives? I do not think she liked me because I am me, Gregor said. I think she liked me because I am monster. I think you're sabotaging yourself, man. She's hot, look at her. Gregor did. She was attractive. He sighed. Neuter, do you not know what a devotee is? Neuter shook his head. It is slang term for someone who's attracted to people with disabilities because of the disability. I think it is about power. Attraction to someone because they are weak somehow. I think it is likely that Laura sees me as weak because of the way I look. The way I may have trouble day to day, and this is compelling to her in a similar way to how a cripple or blind man might be to a devotee. This does not appeal to me. No way, maybe she likes you because of the person underneath. She did not see enough of me to know the person she did not see enough of me to know who the person might be, Gregor replied. I think you're doing yourself a disservice. I jump on that opportunity. You are a stronger person than I am in many ways, Neuter. I should bring the others their dinner. Gregor turned to leave. Hey, signal Pierce downstairs to send another girl or two up, will ya? Gregor did as he was asked, and getting the attention of the bouncer at the foot of the stairs. The bouncer in turn got the attention of a set of girls on the dance floor. While the girls made their way up, Gregor turned to Neuter. Are you happy? Oh man, you're not going to go into philosophical phrase again, are you? I will spare you that. Are you? Dude, look at me. I have money to burn. I've got the hottest girls in the city begging to get a taste of me. Literally wanting to taste me. What do you think? You are happy then. Time of my life, bro. Neuter opened his arms wide to greet a trio of girls as they reached the top of the stairs. I am glad. Gregor turned and entered the hallway at the back of the balcony. As the door still shut behind him, the pounding of the music became behind him dimmed. His next stop was the first door on the left. He knocked. Come in. The bedroom had a bed on each side in opposite corners. One side of the room was cluttered with posters, pictures, and a bookshelf overflowing with books. An Apple computer with 2 CD racks towering above him, and 2 speaker systems. Music from the computer speakers only managed to drown out the music from the club downstairs. The girl who was lying back on the bed had a dense covering of freckles on her face and hands and curly brown hair. Magazines were piled in stacks around her bed, threatening to topple over at the slightest movement. The other side of the room was a bit more Spartan. Nothing adorned the walls. There were no books, no computers, or computer paraphernalia. There was a bed. A bedside labeled table, and a dresser. The only character whatsoever was a colorful bedspread and pillowcase. Gregor knew it had been a gift from Faultline. The owner wouldn't have gone to get it herself. The residence of the side of that room was seated in the corner, staring into a wall. She was blonde, the sort of platinum white blonde hair that rarely lasted through puberty. Her royal purple sweater was slightly too large for her, drooping over her hands, and her pale jeans were clearly intended to be more comfortable than fashionable. "I brought you a dinner, Emily." "Thanks," the freckled girl answered him. She caught the sandwich he threw to her and began to peel the package. "Is she okay?" he asked, gesturing to the girl in the corner. "Not one of her better days." He nodded. "Ill," he spoke gently. "May I come closer?" They learned the hard way that the more distant the girl was, the stronger her power. This made her particularly dangerous when she was so lost that she might not recognize him. Cruel irony. Gregor observed that she had virtually no power at all when she was most herself. It was a problem they hoped to find an answer to someday. The girl in the corner turned to meet his eyes. He took it for a consent, approached her and pressed a sandwich into her hands. "Eat," he instructed her. She did, almost mechanical in her movements. After Faultline had enlisted him in Neuter, a job had taken them into a high-security asylum. They had been there to question someone about the Dragon Slayers, a villain group that used Tinker technology stolen from the most powerful and highest-profile Tinker in the world for petty theft and mercenary work. Their invasion of the asylum had not gone as well as it may have. Their invasion of the asylum had not gone well as it might have, and had to be a high-tech lockdown of the facility. Not only did it extend their mission by several hours, but it had led to issues with one of the residents, a parahuman that apparently had to be moved regularly, lest her influence over her surroundings spread beyond the confines of her cell, making her a serious problem for the staff, other residents, and unwitting bystanders. Let me just drink some water here, one sec. In the end, after dealing with the dispatched squad from Boston Protectorate and getting the information they needed on the Dragon Slayers, they recruited the girl. He watched and waited long enough to ensure that she was on her way to finishing her sandwich, then turned to leave. Emily gave him a small wave of the hand in goodbye, and he nodded once in acknowledgement. His final stop was the office at the end of the second-floor hallway. He peered in the window and let himself in as quietly as he could. Faultline, owner of the Palanquin and several other cover businesses across Brockton Bay, was seated in a large oak desk. In front of her, in the midst of ledgers, notebooks, and university textbook, was something that looked similar to a xylophone, a series of rods lined up next to one another, strapped tight to a board. Faultline was in her professional clothes, a white dress shirt with the sleeves rolled back and black slacks tucked into shiny black riding boots with steel toes. Her wavy black hair was tied into a ponytail. She wore no mask. Those employees of Palanquin who ventured as far as this office were too well paid to turn on her. Her features were perhaps too sharp to be called conventionally attractive, but Gregor knew she was certainly more attractive than Neuter or himself. As Gregor watched, she closed her eyes and swiped her hands across the top ends of the rods. Red and blue energy crackled, and coin-shaped pieces of wood, metal, and stone plastic fell into the desktop. Other rods, several of which were green wood, were untouched. "Fuck," she muttered. She swept the coin-shaped bits of various material into a trash can sat behind the desk. Glancing up at where Gregor stood, just inside the doorway, she raised an eyebrow. "I did not wish to interrupt you." "Don't worry about it. Maybe distracting me will help." "If you are sure." He approached the desk, setting the paper bag down on it. "It was 7 o'clock. Nobody had eaten yet. I got us some sandwiches. Thank you. How's Elle?
Spitfire said she was having a bad day, but she has eaten now. Perhaps tomorrow will be better.
Faultline sighed. Let's hope. It's very easy to let yourself grow attached to that girl, know what I mean?
Yes.
Fuck! She swore, stripped her hand over the rods, and again, the green wood refused to cut.
What are you doing?
We talked about the Manton effect.
The rule that prevents some powers from affecting living things. You have been trying to remove such restrictions from yourself.
Without luck? It's a matter of time before we're on a job, things come down to the wire, and I'm too weak because of this arbitrary limitation.
I find it hard to believe anyone who has toppled a building on someone could call themselves weak.
There was more luck than anything else, she sighed, as she adjusted the position of the rods.
If you say so.
It's not like there isn't precedent for this. We know for a fact that some capes who were once held back by the Manton effect have figured out a way around it or past it. Narwhal being the most obvious case.
Yes.
There's a school of theory that says the Manton effect is a psychological block, that because of our empathy for living things, we held back our power on an instinctual level. Or maybe because we hold back against the other living things because there's a subconsciously imposed limitation that prevents us from hurting ourselves with our own powers. It's too general, encompassing other living things instead of ourselves.
I see.
So I'm trying to trick my brain. With this setup, I have moved from inorganic material to dead organic material with living tissue. Green wood in this case, or I can mix it up so it goes from one end to the other without any pattern. If I can trick my brain into slipping up and anticipating the wrong material, maybe I can push through the mental block. Do that once and it'd be easier for future tries. That's the theory anyways. She tried again. Fuck.
It does not seem to be working.
No kidding. Do me a favor, rearrange these, don't let me see them. He approached the desk, unstrapped the rods, stuffed them down, and then strapped them in place where she sat with her eyes closed.
Go,
he told her. She tried again, eyes still closed. When she opened them, she cussed a few times in a row. Gregor stepped around the desk, grabbing her by the throat with his left hand and pulled her out of her chair. He shoved her to the ground and climbed atop of her as she was straddling her. His knees pressed her arms down. His grip tightened incrementally. Faultline's eyes widened as her face began to turn color as she struggled. She brought her knees up to his back, but one might have been more success hitting a waterbed. The effect was the same. Beneath his skin, which was tougher than one might have guessed, his skeleton, muscles, and organs all sat in the sea of viscous fluids. His skeleton, he'd learned, was more like a shark's than a human's. It was a flexible cartilage that bent where bone would break and healed faster than bone. He'd been hit by a car and climbed to his feet shortly after. Her kicks would not have much effect.
I am sorry, he told her.
Her struggles grew gradually weaker. It took some time before she started to go limp. He waited a second longer, then released her. She sputtered into a cough as she heaved air into her lungs. He waited patiently for her to recover. When she looked more or less in control of her own breathing, he spoke.
Months ago, we were talking about this subject, the Manton effect. You mentioned how it might be possible for someone like us to have a second trigger event, a radical change or improvement in their powers as a result of life or death moment. Such might explain how one broke the Manton rule.
She nodded, coughing again.
It would not have worked if I had warned you in advance. I am sorry.
She took her head, coughed once, then answered him, her voice hoarse. It didn't work anyway.
I am sorry.
What if it had worked, you big lunatic? What did you expect me to do to you? What did you expect me to do to you? Cut off your hand? Kill you?
I thought perhaps my hand or arm. At worst, I do not think you would kill me, even in a moment such as that. You have done much for me. Even if it proved impossible to reattach, I would not say it is a very attractive hand.
He examined the hand he just used to strangle Faultline.
To lose it for something you have been working for a long time is not a regrettable thing.
Idiot. She pulled herself to her feet, coughing again. How the hell am I supposed to get pissed at you when you say something like that? He stayed silent. Well, either that's not going to work, or I need someone that gets me even closer to death. In that case, I'm scratching it off the list anyways. She moved her chair and sat down on her desk, shoving the apparatus with the rods into the trash. I like being alive too much to dance on the razor's edge.
Yes.
His voice was quiet. Thank you, by the way, for trying that, she told him, as he emptied the bag of 1.5 sandwiches. She returned Gregor's half sandwich to the bag and put hers aside, unopened. I didn't expect it was easy. He shook his head. So returning a favor then. Sit down. He pulled a chair over and sat on the other side of the desk. A year ago, you agreed to give me a share of your earnings in our little group. I put them towards answering some questions we had.
I remember.
I'll talk to Vera's about this soon, but since you were the one that paid the most, I thought it was only right that I share with you first. She opened a drawer and retrieved a file. She pushed it across the desk. This is what I found so far. He opened the file. The first page was an image, high resolution, of a stylized U or a C turned 90 degrees counterclockwise. He touched his upper arm where a tattoo identical to the image marked him. Whoever it is, Faultline explained, whether it's one person or many, it is very, very good at covering their tracks. He turned through the pages. The next set of pages were pictures, crime scenes, official files, and newsgroup articles about various parahumans, each set of pages relating to a specific one. The first was a monster of man with beetle-like shell covering his body. Gregor himself was second. You and Newt already know you aren't alone. On a steady basis, parahumans have been turning up across North America. Retrograde amnesia, all marked by the same tattoo as you on various parts of their body. Each of them was dumped in and out of the way locations in an urban area. Always ditches, rooftops, under bridges.
Yes.
Gregor turned more pages. Each set of the pages had more individuals like him. Here's the thing, though. At first, most were strange in appearance. As many as 4 out of 5 monstrous parahumans, if you'll excuse the term, follow the pattern, and a number might increase if you got the chance to examine or get a decent interview with the others. The tattoo, amnesia, their first memories are waking up somewhere in a strange city.
At first, you said.
Gregor asked.
This changed.
Turn to the red tab. He found the red tab that stuck out to the page, a high quality of an attractive red-headed girl. She showed up in Vegas. The whole casino thing has bitten the dust, pretty much, since parahumans who could game the odds or cheat started showing up. But there's underground games still. She participated in a few and had a bounty on her head in a matter of days. She's calling herself Shamrock, and I'd put good money on the fact she'd got powers that'd let her manipulate possibilities.
I see. Why are we talking about her?
Next page. He turned to the page. It was a grainy surveillance camera image. Shamrock was in the midst of changing clothes in what looked like an underground parking lot, and through partially observed by her bra strap, the tattoo was visible on her shoulder blade, a stylized U. Puzzle piece number 1. Given the dates, and you're free to look over them in your own time, going by the first sightings, people that are showing up with these tattoos are getting less and less monstrous with each passing year. Not always, but it's a trend. Then, boom, we got Shamrock. No strange features to speak of. He turned ahead a few pages. Puzzle piece number 2, I'm afraid, is one of those cases where these things have been covered up too well for us to verify. But I'll tell you what I've heard. Tallahassee, Florida. Yeah! Yeah! Just a few months ago, a rumor circulated around someone calling themselves the dealer.
What was he dealing?
Powers.
Powers.
Gregor echoed her. Pay him an amount in the neighborhood of $35,000. The dealer gives you something to drink, and you join the ranks of the heroes and villains in the Cape community. Powers in a bottle.
I see. How does this relate?
Because one individual claiming to be a customer made a blog post about his transaction. It's near the end of that file. In his post, he described the dealer having a metal suitcase that filled with vials. Engraved on the inside of the lid,
the same symbol as the tattoo.
Gregor guessed. Faultline nodded. And that's where we stand.
I see. Can we track down this individual with the blog?
He's dead, murdered by 2 unnamed capes less than a day after he made the post.
Oh.
What I think is that someone figured out how to get people powers and they made a business out of it. But the first attempts didn't go so well. It could be that if chemistry is bad, like the people who drink the stuff become you, like Newt or like Sybil and Scarab.
So, this person or people, you think they're experimenting? They have been refining their work and physical changes have been smaller.
And this dealer was either their salesman or most likely someone who had stole their work and tried to profit off of it. The people he dealt with didn't get the tattoos. Gregor's chair groaned painfully as he leaned back.
What is next?
No one's seen or heard of this dealer since the blog poster was murdered. The dealer's either dead or gone to the ground, so we follow our other lead. I've got private investigators looking for Shamrock. I'm thinking we wrap up our contact with Quail here then. If we're lucky enough that our PIs might find her before the bounty hunters do, we pay her a visit. Either she can tell us something or we can offer her a position on our team. Or both, he said, in an ideal world. Fallen smiled.
All right. Yeah, I think I'll call it here. We're probably gonna do all of arc 6 tomorrow. So yeah, thank you too for being here tonight. I greatly appreciate it. Yeah. So come back here tomorrow. We'll be doing all of hopefully, crossing my fingers, all of Worm arc 6. I'll try to push forward and start the stream early and get it done. But yeah, thanks for joining, guys. Much appreciated. And y'all have a safe night now.
Goodbye. See ya.